Hi YouTube, this is Angie the Anti-Theist. It's Sunday morning, which means all across the country, millions of families are dragging their kids to church for Sunday school. Here they will hear stories. They'll hear stories about animals in a boat and a man and a fish coming back from the dead and healing, diseases magically, and a God writing on the walls, and, Adam and Eve and a tree and a snake, and they'll hear stories. They'll hear stories about hell. They'll find out that there's, two different outcomes for afterlife, and that people who believe the way they do will go to the happy place, and that people who disagree, people who, for whatever reason, believe something else or simply cannot accept the claims that their religion makes, will go to hell. Whether that's simply annihilation or separation from God or a real physical place with actual fucking hot fire. And since kids are literal minded, many will think you mean the latest, whatever you're actually trying to teach them. If you tell them about wailing and gnashing of teeth, they're gonna think you mean literal wailing and literal teeth gnashing. So we're going to teach the children miracle stories. We're going to teach them about hell. Well, we'll also need to teach them about original sin. Original sin is crucial to Christianity. I mean, we're going to need to teach kids that they're unacceptable, that they're inherently flawed, bad, wrong, dirty, sinful, evil. We can't possibly let children be judged on realistic standards of human behavior. No, we have to compare them to the arbitrary laws dictated by an all-powerful being who is extremely petty. Because, after all, you wouldn't want your children to think that they were okay. You wouldn't want them to think that they were born just fine. You have to instill in them the sense that they are guilty of some crime for simply having been born with a sinful nature God supposedly put in them. And if you blame Adam and Eve, it's still God making everybody else be born with an original sin. A sinful nature, deserving of hell and death for all eternity. So, okay, we'll tell the children stories that are impossible, stories that are immoral. We'll fill them with fears about being guilty, and we'll fill them with guilt about not knowing whether or not they're actually pleasing this God or not, because after all, it's impossible. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. A terrible burden to put on children, but it's necessary if we're trying to save their souls. Finally, the loophole. We'll tell them about Jesus. We'll tell them a story about how a God-man came down and was brutally killed for their crimes that they've committed by being born the way the God made them. And somehow this extremely, bloody and barbaric execution is pleasing to the God, who is also the one dying, but the one in heaven too. Somehow this is something that the God wants. A bunch of humans killing his son made him forgive humans for being born the way he made them. So let's drag our kids to Sunday school, teach them about hell, teach them about death, teach them that they are sinful, evil, and wrong just the way they are for being born. See, I never questioned original sin when I was a Christian, when I was a child. I knew I was sinful. I mean, wasn't that obvious? I was such a horrible wretch, I needed that amazing grace. I needed that blood sacrifice to make up for who I was, because I was so wrong, right? No, I was just being brainwashed into a religious cult by an extremely abusive and neglectful, unloving family. But they told me about a God that was just like them, just as capricious, just as demanding, just as cruel, if not crueler. Because after all, they never would have been able to punish me for eternity. They never would have been able to forgive all my sins. They wouldn't have the opportunities to be nicer to me than they were, being as flawed as they were and believing as much nonsense as they did. I understand why Christian parents bring their kids to church, why they have them watch VeggieTales videos and, you know, tell them that God made them special and he loves you very much and, have them sing, Father Abraham had many sons. I understand you're not trying to brainwash your kid. You don't realize, that that's what's actually going on. You think that you are saving your kid's soul. You are putting your kid on the right path for life and for prosperity and for not spending eternity in hell because that shit scares you too. You want your kids to be in heaven. I get that. I wanted my kid in heaven. I dragged him to church. I bought VeggieTales videos. I understand. I read him the children's Bibles. He still has them. I mean, I just don't tell them that they're any more true than Blue's Clues or Dora or Backyardigans. I don't tell him that Santa's any more true than any of those things either. And he's a little bit older, we've started talking about real or pretend, but, I'm not going to tell him that I know the absolute certainty about God and that it's that he's evil, that he's wrong, that he's in need of some cleansing before he'll be acceptable in God's sight. Because the first time I held my son, after 98 hours of labor, after months of waiting, after years of being told I would never have a child, first time I held him in my arms, I just looked at this tiny, perfect, squashed little human being, and I couldn't imagine that he was sinful. I couldn't imagine that he deserved hell or death. I couldn't imagine that a God could create something so beautiful, so pure and wonderful, and let it go bad, and let there be crib death and childhood cancers and a Holocaust and pollution. How could a God not want to protect this little tiny baby that I did? I didn't become an atheist the day my son was born. It took another year and a half. But I think that moment was pivotal. It's why I didn't want to tell him that he was bad, because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't look at my kid and believe in original sin anymore. It breaks my heart that other parents can. As an atheist, I'm relieved that I don't feel the crushing weight of responsibility for saving my kid's soul. It's a huge burden lifted off of me because I don't believe in an afterlife, and I don't believe in a cruel and capricious God that would base eternity and suffering based on belief, not on character or morality or choices or charity or prudence or love, just belief. I'm glad that I don't have to worry about my son going to hell. I'm glad my son doesn't have to worry about me going to hell. I'm glad there is no hell. I'm really glad there's no hell. Wouldn't that be wonderful if there was no hell? I mean, just think about that. Just think about how wonderful it would be if there was no torture forever, if your friends who didn't believe as you did were okay. Wouldn't that be great, Christians? Wouldn't it be great if your kids were going to be okay, even if you didn't brainwash them? Even if you didn't drag them to church on Sunday morning to hear some really unbelievable stories? So Christians, have fun at church. I hope the social aspects are enjoyable. I hope the coloring pages are fun and the silly songs with Larry silly. But I hope your kids don't believe it. I hope they don't believe that they're evil. I hope that they don't believe that there's a hell. I hope they don't spend their lives scared that they or the people they love will suffer for eternity. I hope everybody has a great and godless day. Take care.